It's been 1 year since the launch of the Goods and Services Tax, and I'm joined by someone very special, one of the chief architects of the landmark indirect tax reform regime, the CBIC Chairperson, Ms. Varnaja Sarna. Many thanks for taking your time out and speaking to us at ET Now. GST at 1. Is there an unfinished agenda as you retire?
Let's just say that the last 15 months have been stormy and well, challenging. But in a change like this, which is huge and affects the whole country, and the way you collect taxes, I think there would always be an agenda. So to call it unfinished, I'm not quite sure, but it is something which is in the making and it's work in progress. And like most of you would know, wherever GST has been rolled out, it always takes a couple of years or maybe a little more to actually settle down completely. I would say for the first year, it's not been bad at all. And one was actually worried about possible, hurdles of a kind which would become difficult to handle. We haven't faced that. We've been able to ride over and tide over a lot of the issues that did come up, and a lot of it is to do with the proactive way in which both the GST Council and government actually faced these issues.
Would you say now that initially we did see how there was a lot of political troubles, all parties we were not able to bring them on board. Would you say now, in a way, GST has been, stabilized, we are way past the teething troubles and things will only look up from here?
Let's just say that I'm looking at GST as something which has actually brought center and state together. And if there were those differences, I think GST has just completely removed them. As you know, the Honorable Finance Minister has also said this before, that it's a very unique experience to have centre and state on board, have the GST Council meetings and have unanimous decisions. So you've not had to go to vote on anything so far, and I think that speaks hugely about the way in which the entire nation, centre and states and the government have approached GST. That with the intention that, when you're talking one nation, one tax, you're actually proving you're doing that.
A valid point that you've raised, that the centre and state relations have just gone a step further with the GST. Since we are talking about things that are left out, what happens to them? Are you looking at rate rationalization for a lot of products that are in the 28% category, items like cement, paint? There were a lot of talks about these items being brought to a lower category. Is that something that you're actively looking at?
I don't want to mention specific items, but let me say that 28% was trimmed down hugely after the Guwahati meet. And yes, if you're looking at 28% being only valid for high value sin goods, then there is definite scope. The question here is, as a good revenue officer, I'll have to think in terms of revenue, and I think we all need to be concerned about it, because we're riding well so far. We've stabilized nicely, including rates. Now, to tamper with rates in a hurry, I think would not be appropriate. You need to look at the holistic picture. You should be assured that you're going to get the kind of revenue you're looking at, and then think in terms of trimming down.
In fact, you've led me to my next question, which is on GST collections. If you look at the collections for the month of March, that was the only month where we reached and hit the 1 lakh mark. More so, from November to April, we have seen between 83,000 to 94,000. Would you say the asking rate for GST is very high? Because that's what a lot of economists are saying.
See, I think if you look at what was expected, and if you looked at the way you kept the revenue neutrality, your expectations were very valid and fine. If you look at the way you've increased and expanded your tax base, you have a valid reason to expect that that base is going to contribute more revenue. And yes, definitely that peak in March was I won't say peculiar, but it's a standard March phenomenon. Everybody wants to wrap up their accounts and sort things out. So definitely there was that 1 lakh crore. Since you said 1 lakh, I thought I'll just mention 1 lakh crore. But of course, we are moving in this direction. If you look at pre-1 lakh crore, you were looking at figures which were moving from 83 to 84,000 and then eventually 88 and 89,000. And immediately after that month, you're looking at 94,000. So what you need to compare is 89,000 with maybe 94,000. So that's a good climb. And as you go along and as you continue with your enforcement measures, which were on a low key in the beginning, catching up now, transitional credit being verified and cross-checked, Definitely post all this, as you go along, your auditing starting, and then your scrutiny starting of the returns, all this and the e-way bill system coming in, I think a whole lot of factors that will contribute to the fact that I think the expectancy can definitely be hoped to be achieved.
Can you put a number to it, or would you put a number to it?
I would prefer not to, because there is a target, and I think it's as revenue officers, even in pre-GST, there were targets that were put and you continuously tried to reach that. There must be very valid reasons why you cannot reach it, and by and large, society or the economy understands that there were some reasons which may be out of your hands. But as far as reaching the target is concerned, I think the department, whether it was the CBIC or the states, what everybody was focusing on settling of GST. Processes, procedures, simplification, helping the trade, training, awareness programs, focus was there. Focus is definitely now on revenue, and I think we need to be very circumspect and careful as we go along to ensure that nothing rocks the boat and we're only moving from a graph which is getting higher and higher.
In fact, I'll tell you why I asked you about the asking rate, because, when we were talking to a lot of economists, a lot of people in North Block, they believe that given the fiscal consideration, given where oil is, given how things are panning out, would you say that, because you're in North Block, we are very heavily dependent on indirect taxes? I mean, this is something that you yourself are forefronting.
I think from the economy point of view, it's always good to start trimming down and reducing, and direct taxes perhaps, taking over or increasing. This is the ideal situation. But I think with GST, we're actually going to be heading there. And once your tax base increases, once you get that much more compliance, once you get that many people on board, once you get unorganized sector into the organized sector, this is all the masala, as I'd like to call it, for the ideal. So we're heading there. This is a question of time. And I think with GST, it's the best thing that will happen. And as you said, indirect taxation needs to honestly reduce. Maybe your slabs need to reduce, your rates may need to be more rationalized. All that is in the offing. I think to expect everything to be cram-jammed into 1 year and thinking that that ideal is going to be reached immediately after or on the 1st of July is something which is a bit of a dream. But as I say, as an officer of the department, and with revenue concerns, if you don't have high targets, your efforts will slack. So you simply have to have good, solid, high targets, and everybody involved has to work towards it.
HSBC in fact came out with a report, and they said the GST regime was originally associated with formality, but so far in our view, we've not been able to live up to that. Would you agree with that criticism?
As in the formality of it?
The formalization of the economy.
The formalization of the economy, it's all happening. This is what GST is all about. You're bringing people on board who've never been on board. You've got it in a systematic, everything is now computer related. Everybody now knows this is digitization at its best. How do you escape it once you're in it? So this is a nice way to get people on board. Like I said, I don't think you need to be too much in a hurry. You need to be on the right path. Once you're on that path, it's like an auto propeller. You're there and there's no going back now. So you're only going to move forward, and according to me, that's the best formula. You head on.
I understand where you're coming from, that formalization of the economy is happening. Let me talk on the other hand, the concerns that the states have. We are seeing that there are many states, especially union territories like Daman and Diu, Dadar and Nagar Haveli, Puducherry, there the revenue shortfall is massive, between 74% to 49%. States like Himachal, Uttarakhand, Bihar, J&K, again we are seeing massive shortfall. Do you think, as centre, firstly, how would you look to plug that shortfall? And somewhere down the line, do you believe that, the fact that there is still, after 1 year, a huge shortfall between what was expected and what the states are getting, that could be one of the reasons that the states are not willing to let go of their cash cows, like real estate, like alcohol, fuel?
Alcohol, as you know, is out of the GST. So yes, as far as fuel and other things are concerned, certainly. But I think, every state or union territory has to assess its own situation. It is your state, your assessees. So what went wrong, or did nothing go wrong, but there's a better way to manage this, I think is something that states have to look at themselves. And in almost every case we've tried to showcase GST and make it as easy as possible. The question here is whether the industry in these particular states is coming on board. So in some cases, evasion has been there even pre-GST, it will be there even post. So the question is how well you plug that, how well you use your resources to ensure that people are on board, weaning them in and helping them and hand-holding them to make sure they're there. So I think there's something every state and UT will have to look at.
It's the state that is responsible for their own revenue shortfall and not the center in that case?
It depends. I mean, I won't blame it on them entirely, but I think as a state, you have to assess the kind of revenue you got pre-GST, what was expected of you now, and wherever the help, since the center is already providing a 5-year relief through compensation, this is a lead time for every state and UT to look into what they are doing, and you have to, I think, introspect and try, and I think every state and UT would want to be out of this dependency. So definitely people would be working towards this, and till then there's the cushion, so they know that.
It makes life easier for the center also.
And I don't believe that any state or union territory would not want to be independently getting the revenue they should, and in fact shrugging off the compensation if they could.
We are talking about it, the usual cash cows, the fact that crude prices have been very volatile, and key products like crude oil, petrol, diesel, natural gas, ATF, all out of the ambit of GST. Do you believe perhaps now is the right time for the center to ask states to ensure that these are brought under the ambit? I know Aviation Ministry has been pushing for getting ATF for a very long time.
As a matter of fact, the provisions in the law itself, in the CGST, has a specific provision for inclusion of these 5 petroleum products eventually in GST. I'm not quite sure about the timing, but eventually it should come. It's good because it provides input tax credit and therefore will eventually affect the consumer. So down the line you'll find that benefits do trickle down, so things should get cheaper. It's a good place to be, and it's definitely good to bring it on board. The question is the timing, because we are talking here exactly what you said, the comfort zone of the revenue and the high targets to meet, and then here you're looking at, at bringing these on board as well. So there's this fine balance you have to maintain between the revenue you will lose.
Because you're saying timing, I mean, repeated requests by the center, whether it was the petroleum minister or whether it was the finance minister himself, they've fallen on deaf ears with respect to states. I mean, has the center in that sense been not been able to provide the required comfort to states, telling them that, well, hey, once we are able to get all these items, it will make life easier for you, it will make life easier for consumers, you will not be able to bear so much burden?
I wouldn't say it's fallen on deaf ears. I think centers are aware of what it's doing. Like I said, that's why the timing is so crucial. Everything has to go in a kind of sequential order. So you need to have your GST settled down well in terms of its policy, in terms of the processes, procedures. That's the comfort level for the trade. They need to be able to file, they need to be able to pay taxes, they need to be able to get their refunds on time. All this has to happen. The second one is the rates. You fix the rates, you tweak the rates. Now, I'm not saying there can't be another tweaking, but the question here is the balance between the revenue and what you need to get, what your target is, and what you're looking at. So there is scope for inclusion of all these. There is scope for reduction and rationalization of rates, but I think all of this has to come. One doesn't want to be blundering or kind of pushing forward just for the sake of doing it. It has to be a well thought out and considered decision, and the council will do so.
Would you say by GST at 2 we could be looking at something totally different than what it is now?
Well, I wouldn't say totally different, but I'll say that every year will be an add-on to improve the GST. It's just come in, it's just a year. I think for a year it's done very well, it's settled down very well. People have accepted it. Now you're looking at the next part. One is the acceptance, now you're looking at embracing it. People should actually turn around and say, I just love GST. And that's going to happen. But that is all, as I said, a step by step. You can't jump the gun and reach the last step before crossing
and
the
for
path.
somebody who's seen a lot of these hurdles, the fact that you're saying we want people to embrace GST is it's very nice to hear. Let me also ask you about the sugar cess. You know, the government, I know, has formed a committee. You've also reached out to the AG for his opinion. Where are things headed? I mean, you know, the one view is that yes, sugarcane farmers are reeling under a lot of pressure. They need to be given some sort of a comfort. The centre has already provided them with a sugar package. On the other side, the issue remains that this is going to open a Pandora's box. Kerala has already said that if you give a cess for sugar, then there needs to be a cess for rubber as well.
You know, I think the concept of GST itself, when it was conceptualized, was an amalgamation or a merger of many taxes and cesses as well, with the focus being that you don't want to have cesses in the GST regime. But I think there's nothing, you should not close your doors, and you need to be flexible and open-minded as to whether you need to do something which is going to help the farmers. So this matter itself is before the group of ministers that was formed after the last GST Council meeting, and they are looking at options. I think we'll have to wait for the group of ministers report.
But aren't you concerned about distorting GST? I mean, that was one of the criticism that everybody had when we were talking about a 4-rate structure, when we spoke about rate rationalization, and now the moment you bring a cess, then again it distorts GST.
That's one of the major issues that probably has come up, where the feeling is that, you know, don't touch the GST as such, the way it was conceptualized. But I think, as I said, one must not be negative or completely shut out anything which may be the correct solution. Here the question is, what are the options in front of you that can help the farmers, and of that, what would be the best option, taking into account everything. So as I said, I think group of ministers will give their report, we'll wait for that, and let's see what they recommend.
Last time, is sugar cess a best option in this case?
I'd still say that I think we need to look at all options and then decide.
Okay, let me also ask you about return simplification. You know, one good thing is that all new taxpayers are hailing the fact that, you know, you've decided to rework and redo the return simplification process, whether you have nil transactions or whether you are under the composition scheme. Only one return form has to be you know, put out. You know, what is the transition that you're looking at in terms of timeline? How are things looking at? Are we on track, on board?
Let's just say that a lot of thought has been gone into what kind of a format it should be, and the whole focus has been that it should get really simplified. It should be easy to use for people. So it took a lot of time, because you want information in that format which is important for you. So you can't leave out anything, and yet you need to put it in a way which is simple for people. That's a very tricky kind of a situation. But undoubtedly, having just one return is going to be, you know, the ultimate and the best way in which the trade can accept it as well. That is being worked on, and hopefully the final picture should come before the GST Council in the next meeting. And then, of course, once you've visualized and conceptualized it, you need somebody to now do the systemic part of it. I think that GSTN would have to look at what is a timeline to put this together.
Has the government put the invoice matching completely at abeyance in that sense? Because we are looking at a new structure.
I think let's just wait for the final format of this to come. And as you asked me the question earlier, how do we look at it? It has to be done in phases. So you have to carry through with your GSTR 3B and 1, and that is kind of settled and been accepted by most. So you ride along with that and you handhold people into the next regime of the new return. So it would be in like 2-3 phases where you'd be probably moving gradually into the new system.
But given revenue is so much of a concern, aren't you worried that if invoice matching is not there, then we may see certain evasion of taxes by traders?
Yeah, but we haven't done away with invoice matching as yet, so we can't say it's not there.
But you've not reintroduced it either.
It's something, like I said, you have to look at the comfort level of the trade. You have to see what is easy and acceptable by them. You have to at the same time balance it with what you think as a department you need. So I think it's a combination of factors that will eventually bring out the kind of return that you will have. in which you will naturally try to cover as much space and need that the department has.
You know, are there any plans for reintroduction of the reverse charge mechanism? That has also been a proposal that has been pending for a very long time. And you know, just a follow-up question for that. In a country like India, where there are of course a lot of unregistered sellers, putting the liability on buyers, don't you think it's going to be a risky proposition?
So that's the very reason why it's been on hold. It has to be well thought of. It needs to be seen that on ground level, how will this operate? You know, how easy is it going to be? How hard is it going to be on, you know, the supplier or the buyer? So I think those are all the considerations that are holding it back from actually coming into being.
Any timeline for this? 6 months, 8 months?
I wouldn't like to put a timeline at the moment.
You know, let me shift focus from all these and talk about the exporters. The special window that was opened up for refund for exporters, a lot of refunds have flown post that. I remember having a conversation with you where you said that we want dependency to come down to 500 crores. Yes. You know, what's the roadmap? I mean, I'm sure this is going to be music to the ears of a lot of exporters.
Let's just say that the first refund fortnight in the month of March, very unusually for a revenue department to be doling out instead of collecting, but we did it because we thought there was hardship, there was issues of capital blockage, so we need to definitely, you know, look at that factor, and it was a very successful fortnight. It was the only way we thought we could focus completely, divert staff and just concentrate on this. Since its success, in the month of April and May, it kind of slumped down again because there were so many priorities. But then we decided we still had a large number, and one of the issues that we had was that there was a lot that was not sent to the CBIC. It was still pending with GST, and we had to work out a formula to be able to get and retrieve. So it had to move to a partial manual mode, which we then did, and then we did a lot of highlighting and hand holding on what you exactly have to do. So any number of instructions and circulars were issued so that trade would know the step-by-step process on how to claim it. And then at the end of the second fortnight, there was a comfort zone that out of a total of maybe 41 or 42,000 crores, you have come down to a pendency, you have cleared about 38,000. So you have 3,000 or 4,000 left. I'm not saying it's too big. Against 41,000, it's not too bad, and it's still working. As I'm talking, it's probably going. And in case you saw my Friday letter, I had specifically mentioned there that there may be a closure of the fortnight, but those who've got pending claims in their jurisdiction must continue to work as if it's a refund fortnight. So we have to just go hammer and tongs, and this is about clearing the pendency of refunds pre-30th April. And then by and by, things will fall into place, and then it would be more or less moving on a monthly kind of basis.
You know, my last two questions, and one on the real estate sector. While stamp duty is still out of the ambit of GST, the other issue is that the builders are not passing the benefit of ITC to consumers, to people who are looking at taking up their flats. And apart from that, there is a huge anomaly between ready to move in flats and the under construction flats. Is the government looking at this issue actively?
Yes, of course, it's an issue to be looked at. But let me also say that, you know, this issue of not passing on, now this is of course of concern. It's not just in the real estate sector, but in any sector. That is why the National Anti-Profiteering Authority was created. And there are a number of complaints that have come to them. There are a lot of investigations going on. And definitely there will be orders passed, and people who are profiteering and not passing on will be brought to book.
Ma'am, my last question to you, and because you know we're talking at a time when crude prices have been very volatile, there is another issue that you look at, and that is of excise as well. Is there some sort of a comfort, or do you think the fiscal considerations are too high? I know the government was looking at a formula, you know, for oil prices. Have we been able to reach to any sort of consensus in that?
I wouldn't actually like to comment on that at the moment. I think, you know, suffices to say that as far as petroleum products are concerned, bringing them into the ambit of GST is something which is definitely to be thought of, and let's see how that progresses and helps the entire, you know, sector.
All right. On that note, many thanks for taking your time out and speaking to us at TT.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.